Welcome to the Shepherd Mills, Inc. From alpaca to yak, the Shepherd's Mill creates an exquisite yarns and fabrics from the nation's finest natural fibers. If you desire marketable product from your own fiber-producing animals, artfully conscious created interior design or fashion products, or U.S.-sourced, U.S.-produced netting, weaving, or crochet yarn and hand spinners roving and other fine fiber arts supplies, we're here to help. If you have fiber to process at the Shepherd Mill, our goal is to provide you with a quality finished product that we will be happy using and proud to sell. As a producer, you may know exactly what you want. If so, we ask a few questions and do our best to meet your specifications.
What sets the Purina goat mineral and the Purina wind and rain sheep mineral apart from other minerals that are on the market is because they are designed by folks that are in the business. We work very hard at the Purina Animal Nutrition Center in Gray Summit, Missouri to maximize efficiency, to increase the number of lambs that we have on the ground, and I know the goat herds that we work with are on the same role as us. The best way for producers to ensure that they don't have a mineral deficiency is to supply a quality mineral. That's where we have worked so diligently on the Purina goat mineral and also the wind and rain sheep mineral to provide myself and other producers an opportunity to decrease problems. From the reproductive standpoint, vitamins and minerals play a huge role in sheep and goat. That's where we have found the biggest contribution to our operation in terms of AI and embryo and then conception on first-time service. So there's a distinct role that the minerals play in repro for us. That's what makes us unique and different, is because we're creating products that work for us.
Stay Tough Superior Fencing Products presents its fence test video. During this video, you'll witness the strength and resilience of a Stay Tough fixed knot fence compared to a standard hinge joint fence, as both are hit by a full-size truck. Stay Tough fence is made of high tensile wire that's 3 times stronger than low tensile wire and will stretch less than 1%. Low tensile wire will stretch more than 10%. Both fences were installed under identical circumstances and using the same tooling and fence design. Let's see the results. Stay Tough Fence comes with a 10-year written limited warranty. Contact us at 1-888-223-8322 or visit our website to find a dealer near you. Stay Tough Superior Fencing Products. Stay strong, stay tight, stay tough.
Although 2020 has been challenging for us all, it has also given us many reasons to be optimistic about the future of the American lamb industry. We are seeing significant increase in lamb consumption from both existing and new consumers, and like all of you in this essential industry, the employee owners at Superior Farms are working around the clock to meet the high demand for our products. And while supermarkets have seen a surge in the demand for lamb, our food service partners are finding creative new solutions to keep their businesses alive. Superior Farms is working with these loyal American lamb customers to develop new strategies and tactics to help them succeed in the months and years to come. Our goal remains to deliver a consistently great eating experience at a sustainable price for consumers and producers alike. Superior Farms is committed to working with every sector of the U.S. sheep industry to become more efficient and profitable, and we look forward to a safe and prosperous new year for all.
Making Kansas a better place to live and work has been our goal for over 100 years. It's a responsibility we don't take lightly.
Solids or sediment?
365 meters.
365 meters.
K-State Research and Extension serves our rural and urban neighbors by helping you adapt to new technologies, protect our environment, improve nutrition and food safety, and grow the next generation of leaders.
And my world. And my world.
We help farmers and ranchers adopt new tools that improve profitability in a rapidly changing marketplace.
That went into it, going to help some people.
We prepare and inspire leaders to take on challenges with confidence, be responsible, and give back.
Thank you very much. It will be a great help.
I think K-State Extension is a marvelous partner.
We bring people together to complement each other's unique strengths and make communities more vibrant and successful. We are Kansas State University, in every county, working shoulder to shoulder with organizations, local leaders, and you to help our state grow and thrive. We are K-State Research and Extension.
Next up, we're going to start our segment on the wool sheep. And first off is Matt Benz. Matt and Amy are purebred Rambouillet producers in Pottawatomie County. Matt is also the Kansas Sheep Association president. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt as soon as I get his slideshow up and at him. Okay, Matt.
Good evening, Dwayne and everybody. You can hear me now that I unmuted probably. It's great to be with you guys, and really thanks to the sponsors. We've had the opportunity to put on some things similar to this, and without the sponsors, it makes it a lot more difficult. A little anecdote, the video that Superior Lambs, we got to be on that ranch, or a small portion of their range, a few years ago of Osgathorpe's. The part we were on, we drove through a gated community in Park City to get up to their range. So that's really the beautiful area that they run in, and they're really good people, and we're happy they're friends of ours. The picture you're looking at is from 1914 in Southwest North Dakota. That's where we grew up. This was the place where my grandfather was born. His parents were immigrants from Russia. You can see that a few sheep and horses there. At one point in time, the family stories are there were 10,000 sheep in the family, in the extended family, but we have a lot fewer now. Let's go on, Dwayne. This is who we are. This is our family. Amy and I in the middle. Justin is a partner in the operation with our sheep. Cassie's our daughter. Her and her husband and their kids are the reason we moved to Kansas about 6 years ago. We wanted to be closer to them, and it's certainly been a good thing. Justin works for the Kansas Department of Ag as a meat and livestock inspector. Spencer and Cassie have a registered Angus operation, and Cassie's also an animal science professor at K-State. The kids are grandkids. We spoil them every chance we get. Let's go on, Dwayne. We think it's pretty important to be involved in the industry. Said we have friends all over the country we've made because of the sheep industry. People like Osgothorpe's and people in Maine and New Hampshire and North and South Dakota and Texas. It's really important to us to be involved in the industry for them. We don't have as big number of sheep as some of the people we have for customers, but we think it's important to keep it going for them. You can see some of our activities. We had a lot more activities in North Dakota because we were there for a lot longer, but that's just a sampling of what we've done. Let's go on, Dwayne. We'll try and tell you what works for us. It may not work for you. Every operation's different. Our climate and available stock or feed stuffs are probably different than yours, but this is what works for us. We are the 5th generation raising sheep. We've had registered Remblays since 1972, started with Suffolk's in 68 as a 4-H project, got out of them when spiders showed up. It's grown into a deal now where we sell seed stock all across the United States and Canada and Mexico. It's really enjoyable. Here's a picture of our summer pasture. We do some mixed species grazing. Selection parameters, and this is really what the nuts and bolts of our thing is. We sell genetics. These customers we have all over the country, we're trying to help them make money. We've been on performance testing on farm flock testing since the mid 80s. And we got on NSIP about 8-10 years ago. And most of our customers make money selling by the pound. So we put our primary selection emphasis on weaning weight of the lambs, fleece weight, things that go into that are milk and fiber diameter. Those numbers are a tool. You can't do it without sheep that are structurally correct, that can function in their environment. They have to have good feet. We're really particular about udders. We won't keep a stud ram of our own or we won't keep one, or he's going to go to kill, if his mom has a bad udder. We want them to be easy fleshing and some amount of worm resistance. Okay, let's go on. What we do is we lamb in January and February, and also from September to mid-November. It seems to work well for our marketing scheme. We shear ewes the end of July, rams in early April. When we shear, we collect wool data, we take samples, we send them in, get microns, we weigh all the wool. The ewes run a native pasture all from when it greens up until the end of July, when we have to bring them in because it's time to go into breeding groups and also get those fall ewes up and going and ready to lamb. Throughout the year, we feed alfalfa, brome, whole corn, and a custom grain mix. It's a pretty simple deal. The custom grain mix is corn and a protein pellet with some oats and mineral and other stuff in it. We only worm the ewes once a year, and that's normally before we go to pasture in the spring. I guess actually we worm them before we turn the rams in for breeding for fall. So we worm 1st of April about. They stay pretty clean that way. If they come in with dirty hocks, we figure they got a bunch of worms and need some help, and we send them to market. We give a C and D shot and tetracycline in the 3rd trimester. Tetracycline seems to do a pretty good job of combating most of the common abortion things. C and D, we think we get some transferred immunity to baby lambs. We do use a burrow with our sheep pretty much all the time. The part of Kansas we're in, there's some coyotes around and our lambs never get grass, so we don't lose lambs to that, but it's pretty heavily populated and she doesn't like dogs very much, and that's really the biggest benefit she has. During lambing, everything gets jugged. The lambs all get an antibiotic and one of the many molasses drenches that are available on the market. We think they're both pretty important. The antibiotic really seems to, we think it keeps down on the pneumonias, especially later as they get older. Sometimes you don't know when they got it, and I think a lot of times it's in a jug. They're tagged and docked in the jug, then they get grouped, started on commercial creep, because for the number of ewes we have, which is about 100, it just doesn't make sense for us to have our own creep made up. It's just easier and probably cheaper to have to buy one. Lambs get a CD booster at 30 days and we wean at about 60 and we weigh then, and that's where we're at. We sell, like I said, we have a pretty wide stroke of where we sell. I counted up this year, I think we sold to 10 states, from New Hampshire to Arizona, Utah, North Dakota to Texas. We consign to several sales, and I agree with Joe on the importance of getting to face-to-face sales. It's where you meet new customers. We have had success in online sales. Every sheep we've ever sold in an online sale went to somebody that we knew that we had seen at a previous live sale. So it's a pretty important way to gain their trust. The pictures, we're kind of proud of some of the sheep we raised. The polled buck on top was one of the national champion rams we raised. The horned buck toward the right there was the high selling Rambouillet ram in the country this year. The 3 rams below went to the Utah ram sale. So that's kind of what we sell. We do sell a lot of sheep off the place, a lot of rams. Usually April, probably closer to the 1st of May is when we like to start, because we'll have all the data in and we can give our buyers the information that they want. And we want them to be as informed as they can be when they make a decision. We also do have a niche market that's been fairly successful for us, and that's selling show quality ewe lambs to Texas. Our sheep are a little more moderate than some of the sheep further north and east than us in their frame size, and it seems to hit the Texas show thing a little bit better. And like I said, we've had some moderate success down there. Return buyers, everybody in the livestock business knows that's where your money's made, is the guy that comes back the 2nd year or the 3rd year or the 4th year. We try to be transparent and honest. When the buyers have questions, we tell them the truth. And so that's where we're at. And that's what we have. Any questions?
I don't see any questions just yet.
All right, Matt. Well, thank you. And if there are any come up while I'm switching, we can answer them. If not, at the end of the session. Next up will be Stephen Simon.
I got us caught up.
If I can get his up here.
While he was moving the slides.
Stephen and Sarah are commercial sheep breeders from Trego County. Stephen?
Okay, yeah, I'm here, Dwayne.
All righty, go for it.
Okay, well, as Dwayne said, I'm a sheep producer out here. I'm actually in Gove County, Dwayne.
Oh.
Right next to Trigo, though. I'm only about
Sorry.
a mile and a half from the Trigo line there. So, but anyway, you can go to the next slide there, Dwayne. We have a wool flock. I do currently have about 1,700 ewes right now. We run about 1,600 acres. 450 of those acres are pasture. So we rotate between pasture and the dry lot pretty much. All of our lambs are marketed out to Superior in Denver, Colorado. We've actually been with Superior for, I believe it's 20 or 21 years now. Done a lot of good business with them, and it's been real interesting growing with them as well as increasing our flock over the years as well. When I moved here about 7-8 years ago to come back and work on the family farm, they had about, they'd range anywhere from 650 to 800 ewes, kind of depending on the year. But now we've kind of increased that up to about 1,700 ewes. And over the next 3 years, I'm actually intending on getting up to about 2,100 ewes is what my goal is to be at. We are an all wool flock. I did run some Easy Care sheep for a little while. We had some Easy Care rams, and we worked them into the flock for a little bit, but we've slowly worked back away from those. The goal of getting the sheep to the weight that we wanted and whatnot was a lot harder to do with a little bit smaller framed Easy Care sheep than what we were getting off the wool sheep. It takes about 4 to 8 months from time the lamb's born to the time they ship out. And right there, you'll kind of see on average, our lambs harvest at really probably about 140 to 145 pounds would be my actual probable average. Go ahead, Dwayne. There's just a picture of one of my Rambouillet rams standing there with a ewe. That ram came from the Kansas State Rambouillet program probably maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Our flock performance, we do fall lambing. It probably keeps me from approaching that 200% lamb crop that I'd like to see, but with fall lambing, it really helps break up the ewes and don't have so many in the fall. So I plan on selling about 150 to 175% lamb crop after I take out open ewes and death loss and everything. I plan on that being my number out the door. I'll gain anywhere from 0.75 to 1.25 pounds a day on my feeder lambs. Like I said, they will gain at that rate. As they get older, they definitely slow down on the gains a little bit. But I try to get them out the door, like I said, about that 145 pounds. Right now, all the feeder lambs are on a self-feeder grain ration, and we use a Purina product that is a liquid protein that we actually mix in with I actually use a corn and barley mix that we mix that liquid protein into, and then we fatten our lambs with that. We wean lambs at 60 days. If it's a bottle lamb, we'll wean it at 30 days. We do have a creep feed that we've kind of been working on over the last few years with one of the feed guys out of Osborne, Kansas, from Midway Feeds. He's kind of helped us customize a creep feed that we like really well, that seems to do pretty well for us. The newborns are all in jugs, anywhere from 1 to 3 days. If it's an older ewe and it's just a single, she'll probably only be in there 24 hours, and then she'll be out to a group pen. If it's a younger lamb, like a ewe lamb, she'll probably be in there for 2 days. If she has twins, she might even be in there for 3 days. If it is a twin, even on an older ewe, I plan on at least 48 hours in the jug just to make sure they get associated and whatnot. Bottle lambs, I do end up with about 3 to 7% bottle lambs. So I think last year I had quite a few more bottle lambs than normal. I ended up with about 150 to 200 bottle lambs. We do have a couple milk machines that actually help with that, so I don't have to hand feed every one of them. That would get very time consuming and probably take about every bit of our day. Our death loss is probably about a 7 to 15% in our commercial flock. That's pretty much across the board from newborns all the way up to the older ones, basically. I'd say we probably hold closer to that 7 to 10% is probably what we stay in average around here. It kind of varies on your breed and where you're at and the different conditions that you have and whatnot. The wool breeds we use, there's 3 of them right there. Those are the ram types, I guess, that we use. My ewes in particular aren't any particular breed. We have different rams, and I usually select them for a commercial flock. I'll just kind of go through the females, and I will select for open faces, usually twins. And if it's a fall-born lamb, we try to keep the fall-born lambs are the ones we try to keep the most of as far as replacements. If I don't have enough of them born in the fall, then we will go ahead and save some spring ones back as well. The Targies, I've gotten them out of Utah. That's where I pretty much got most of my Targie rams. I did get a couple of them out of Nebraska. The Merinos, I've just got into the Merinos about 2 years ago, and so far I really enjoy the rams. They seem pretty nice and they're good size. They came from Rafter 7 out there in California, and they seemed like they were pretty good rams. Seem pretty prolific and whatnot. Rambouillets, I do have several Rambouillet rams. I'd probably like to get a few more of those. They seem like they're just really good. They do good in the cold, and they just seem like they're pretty hardy, and I don't get a lot of sickness out of them, it doesn't seem like. Another ram that I do have that I did pick up about 20 of last year was the South African meat merinos. They look about pretty much similar to my Targies probably, or maybe even my merinos. I'd say they look real close in there. Very meaty, pretty large rams. They're probably every bit of about 250 to 300 pounds each, I would say. But they're pretty good rams too, it seems like, so far for the year that I've had them in production. Some of my the reason that I kind of like enjoying the wool sheep, and like I said, wool sheep might not be for everybody, but for us and the size of our flock and kind of the way that we're set up with our process and everything, we really enjoy the wool sheep. They seem like they've got a real calm demeanor. They're easy to work with. When I say calm, I did have some easy cares for quite a while. I had a lot of sheep out is what I really had when I had a lot of the easy cares around. They were constantly jumping the fences and all over the place, it seemed like. But the wool sheep seem like they tend to stay behind the fence a little bit better. I will give you the caveat of with an electric fence though, the wool sheep are probably a little bit harder to keep in just because they have that wool on them. They don't take that bite from the fence quite like the hair sheep do. The wool sheep they're a little bit heavier boned. Seems like you get a little bit faster gains out of them, and it's mainly due to their frame size. I think they just eat a little bit more, and they just seem like they get there a little bit faster. As far as when I've watched the hair and the wool sheep kind of side by side there for about 3 or 4 years, and it just seemed like trying to get those the hair sheep up to the size of the wool ones. If I did, it would just lay so much fat on them that they just weren't as, you know, good of a carcass, I guess, because it just had so much fat trying to get them up to that 140 pounds. One other reason that I do like the wool, we've finally started going to the center of the nation up in South Dakota. We actually do get a little bit of a profit off of our wool, even after the shearing and whatnot. So to make that little bit of money has been nice. And then also at harvest, when we ship all of our lambs off to Superior, we also get paid a pelt price. Last couple of years with the trade war with China, the pelt price hasn't been so great, but before the trade war was going on, it was probably anywhere from $5 to $10 a pelt on average, was probably about what we were seeing. And I guess they seem like they really handle the cold really well. One thing, we're in western Kansas where the wind blows. I've kind of taken my sheep, as you see in this next picture. I raise them pretty much indoors. The time that those lambs are born to the time that they go out to market, they are under a roof. And as you can see, we try to keep our barns pretty strawed down, keeps the wool a lot cleaner, and just gives you for really nice, clean looking lambs, especially when they ship out at about that 145 pounds. They look really, really nice. And there's another just picture of, oh, there's some ewes and babies and whatnot. That's pretty much all I had. Nice and short and sweet.
Any questions, Alyssa?
Not that I can see.
All right. Well, the last speaker wasn't able to be with us, so he ended up taping a video for us. If you have any questions for him, put them in the chat. We'll save the chat, and then we will email him the questions, and he'll get back to us. Had something else that came up tonight, so he did tape this and send it to us. So with that, I'm going to get his video started here. Okay, I got the share sound on, so you should be able to hear it this time.
Thank you for the opportunity to present today to the Western Kansas Sheep and Goat Conference. I appreciate this opportunity and apologize for doing it via recording, but at the end of my presentation, I will have my email address.
I forgot to tell you who this was. It's Dr. Christopher Shayer. He's the director at the North Dakota State University Heidegger Research Extension Center. So he'll be visiting with us about that.
So you can contact me if there's any questions. My name is Chris Schauer. I'm a director and animal scientist at the NDSU Heidegger Research Extension Center in Southwest North Dakota. We operate on about 1,500 set of mature ewes. We lamb out about 1,000 ewes a year, in addition to having a small cattle program, wildlife and range, agronomy, and weed science. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'd also like to thank one of my graduate students that's working in my program right now, Rika Baumgartner, who's working on her PhD. I was going to start today talking about extension and outreach efforts here at the Heidegger Research Extension Center. One of the things we're involved at the national level is with the National Sheep Improvement Program and their carcass ultrasound schools and certification. I am the chair for the NSIP Carcass Ultrasound Technical Committee, and therefore I'm tasked with conducting schools across the nation. We had a grant that we wrote about 6 years ago with the National Sheep Industry Improvement Center, and we're funded to conduct schools. We conducted 6 schools by the time we got done with it. Texas A&M University, at North Dakota State University, University of Wisconsin, Penn State University, and Kansas State University. By the end of the program, we had 68 attendees that participated in the school. Not all of them are interested in becoming certified, but we're interested in at least learning about carcass ultrasound. We did certify 55 new technicians or returning technicians to be able to submit data to NSIP through carcass ultrasound. We also developed a new manual, and that is in both online and in print and available for future schools that may be run by the National Sheep Improvement Program. On a similar note, I do some scanning for 4-H State Fair and FFA State Fair live lamb carcass contest. This is a contest sponsored by the North Dakota Lamb and Wool Producers Association with cash prizes, as well as the time and effort of the Hettinger Research Extension Center and our extension service with the sheep extension specialist. Annually, we scan around 100 lambs at the state fair during kind of the weigh day for 4-H, but also scan FFA lambs. And we do loin-eye, back fat, as well as body wall thickness, give a score for leg score, and then put that all into an equation with their weight to determine a boneless, closely trimmed retail cuts. And the top 10 lambs, or top 10 lambs and their owners receive a cash prize for the North Dakota Lamb and Wool Producers Association. Another project that's conducted with the North Dakota Lamb and Wool Producers Association is a starter flock program. That starter flock program awards 10 Ramble AUs, so range ewes, commercial type ewes, to 10 students every year after an application process. Those students then have to repay 70% of the value of those lambs to the North Dakota Lamb and Wool Producers. North Dakota Lamb and Wool Producers buy those lambs from the Hettinger Research Extension Center. And so those students come down to Hettinger, they pick up their lambs, and we do a starter flock school that's designed for entry-level commercial sheep production. We target those students, but it's open to anybody in the state or the region that wants to attend. And that's conducted with a combination of myself, Travis Hoffman, the North Dakota and Minnesota Sheep Extension Specialist, as well as some board members from the North Dakota Lamb and Wool Producers Association. So it's a one-day starter flock school that's had excellent attendance, not just by these students and kids, but as well as adults looking at getting into the sheep industry that may not be familiar with it. Another one of our large schools that we run is the Shearing and Wool Classing School. This is the Saturday, Sunday, and Monday before Thanksgiving annually. The American Sheep Industry Association teaches the wool classing school. And so that wool classing school teaches you how to sort wool, how to make your wool clip more valuable. And it really targets growers that want to make the wool clip more valuable, or people that want to go work on a shearing crew as the wool help. So we really target getting some of those new wool help on the shearing crews in and going for those 3 days. Our shearing school is taught by Wade Copper and Mike Higgins and Alex Mosier, as well as 4 or 5 additional shearers that show up throughout the weekend. As you can see in the pictures below, it's a very large shearing and wool classing school. Annually, we usually are about 24 shearers and between 15 and 20 wool classers. And what's unique about this school in the nation is that it combines wool classing with a commercial shearing operation, even though it's a shearing school. So we have 8 elevated bays, 2 skirting tables, as well as multiple bays to sort into. So from the wool classing perspective, you get that industry type of experience of how it's going to actually happen when you're shearing, if you're employed by a shearing crew to class the wool or sort the wool. And from a commercial and from a producer perspective, it gives you that opportunity as well. So they're conducted simultaneously right before Thanksgiving. Even with COVID restrictions this past year, we were able to do the school. We had 19 shearers from Minnesota, South Dakota, New York, Washington, Montana, Kansas, and North Dakota, and 9 wool classers from South Dakota, Montana, Kansas, and Oregon. Another one of our outreach efforts and extension efforts is testing wool for producers. We have an OFDA, or a wool fiber testing machine, that we lease from the American Sheep Industry Association. We can do on-farm testing of wool for micron, comfort factor, variability that you can use for sorting, etc., or use it for NSIP submission. Most of our producers are small purebred producers that just send samples in a Ziploc bag. That's $2 for in-state samples and $2.50 for out-of-state samples. We do some larger producers on the farm in the region. We are not a certified wool lab, so we can't give you yield. That's where Texas A&M is still the certified wool lab that we recommend. But if you're a smaller producer or just trying to get started, that's a great way to see what it's like before you dive in deep with a certified wool lab. We also do some outreach at ram sales, like the Newell Ram Sale, and regionally, if there's wool outreach events, if there's a shearing contest happening, we've set up trade show booths, or at a fiber festival. And it's also incorporated into research projects at the Hettinger REC and throughout NDSU. We also conduct one of the 2 Rambouillet ram tests of the nation, along with the University of Wyoming. This year, we have 60 Rambouillet rams on test, as well as 6 Dorset and 11 Columbias. For this test, it's a 140-day feeding program where we collect performance traits as well as fleece weights and wool traits. The wool traits we collect are micron variability, length, and weight. We also do carcass ultrasound and do a wrinkle and face score after the 140-day test. The Rambouillet breed has an index that they put all that into to determine their top 30% of the rams of index. And of those, they are eligible for certificate of merit or certifying if they meet the minimum criteria. The Columbia breed has started doing a certification program. They're not using an index, but they are using some minimum thresholds to become a certified ram. So we've got a couple breeds that aren't doing indexing, but just collecting data, like Dorset. We've had Targhee through there as well. But these are all the wool type breeds. We don't run a terminal sire test anymore. We used to do that. There just wasn't enough interest. So switching gears into some of our research efforts to give you a quick snapshot of some of our bigger projects. We've been evaluating an integrated sheep and crop system using winter wheat and annual forages. In North Dakota, there's not a lot of winter wheat grazing, and when there is winter wheat grazing, there's not a lot done with sheep, as well as annual forages or cover crops. Our objectives for this is to evaluate sheep performance in grazing evaluation of fire as a means of managing post-CRP lands for cattle and sheep grazing, and evaluating the impacts on wildlife as well as the CRP. We're trying to increase the diversity and production of those CRP lands. We do a prescribed fire on approximately 25% of the landscape each year in both cattle and sheep pastures, and then we measure performance of the cattle and sheep before and after fire. We also measure changes in nutrient availability and concentration pre and post fire, and evaluate the impacts on wildlife and pollinators. And now I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into one of our more recent projects that I think is unique in the nation, and I thought was worthwhile to get out to the Kansas sheep and goat producers. This is a project conducted by my graduate student, Paige Anderson, who just finished her master's program, and it evaluated the impacts of Banamine injection and pain responses on either rubber ring castrated and tail docked or surgically castrated and docked lambs. So briefly, to take a step back and talk about what pain is, when we talk about the definition of pain, is defined as an adversive sensory or emotional event that causes an animal to experience stress. So what is stress? Stress is a biochemical response that can occur from a physical or psychological response on the individual. We all know that castration and docking are common management practices that need to be done in the majority of the U.S. sheep herd, and that they may cause stress, but we haven't really quantified what that stress is, and if we remediate that stress with pain relief, does it have a difference in performance? And that was the goal of our trial. When we looked at different rubbering or different castration and docking techniques, we wanted to look at more of the conventional ones, so rubber ring castration and docking, as well as surgical castration with Verdezo docking or crush and cut on the tail docking. When we look at ways to alleviate stress through medication, the most common one that we're probably all used to is Banamine or flumioxazine megalamine, and that can be used to alleviate the pain and stress through an injection. There's other ways of doing it as well, besides injection, topical or orally, but we wanted to concentrate on something that research-wise we could really quantify and make sure we have the dosage correct. We wanted to quantify the physiological and behavioral differences because they're just as important as quantifying the performance differences. Sometimes the performance differences may manifest themselves at a later time, but we have to know what happens at the beginning of that castration and docking period on physiological and behavioral responses. So Banamine or flumioxazine megalamine would be the NSAID pain reliever we used in this trial. It can be injected, administered topically, or given orally. We went IV where we could really control the dose. The only trial that we've really seen that used Banamine and evaluated in castrated lambs was done on only 4 lambs per treatment. So a very small subset of lambs. But what they found is for up to 6 hours post-treatment in band castrated lambs, the Banamine decreased cortisol concentration. Cortisol is a steroid hormone, and it's usually associated with high stress. A stressful event would cause cortisol concentration to increase. So our hypothesis was that flunixin meglumine utilization will decrease cortisol and haptoglobin levels, as well as wound and swelling score in either rubber ring or surgically castrated and emasculated dock lambs. And they would also allow for improved performance and decreased physiological stress in either rubber ring or surgically castrated and emasculated dock lambs. We utilized 360 ewes here at Hettinger, and they were put in pens of 15 head indoors. And at birth, we weighed all the lambs and found 181 male ram lambs. And that's when they were allocated to treatment at 7 to 14 days of age. When they were allocated to treatment, we had 2 types of castration: rubber ring or rubber band castration and docking, or surgical castration and emasculator docking. And then those 2 groups are then separated, and 50% of them receive saline and 50% of them receive flunixin meglumine. As I stated, those lambs were weighed prior to treatment and Banamine levels were determined. And then we utilized a behavioral scale to utilize the physical signs of pain. So I'm not going to go into the whole scale, but we wanted to assess normal and abnormal lying, normal and abnormal standing and walking. And those of us that rubber ring castrate know that these are things that we see commonly with rubber ring castration, but they've really never been quantified. And how long do they happen? And are they different than surgical castration? This was taken immediately post-castration, visually by graduate students, and over the next 3 hours intermittently as well. And the lambs are also weighed every 2 weeks thereafter until weaning. So to give you an example of how we were scoring lambs, it's a much bigger scale than just the 4 pictures you're seeing now. But we had a scale where in the upper left-hand corner, V3 would be the ventral position, lying on the side, legs slightly extended. Upper right-hand portion, we see lamb in S2, so standing but extending their legs, a common behavior you'd see in a rubber ring castrated lamb. Bottom left-hand corner, lamb in the L1 position, or lying down and starting to extend their legs, but really on their side. And the bottom right-hand corner, a lamb in a conventional unstressed standing position, or S1 for the scale. Those same 181 male ram lambs were used to evaluate performance traits. We drew blood at -30, 30, 90, and 140 minutes of treatment for cortisol analysis, but also took a subgroup and analyzed their blood for haptoglobin. Haptoglobin is a metabolite that can be used to measure immune response. So if we have higher haptoglobin concentrations, potentially we are going to have an increased susceptibility to having baby lamb pneumonia or some other stressor, whether it's in more mature sheep, might be foot rot or might be pink eye, but haptoglobin gives us an indicator of potential immune response. When we looked at wound and swelling scores, we used some scores that were developed by Small et al. In 2014. We did these on days 14 and 7, or day 4 and 7. We gave a numeric score to the level of swelling that we saw and the level of wound appearance. So increased swelling, and then also on wound appearance, just kind of what type of wound it had. Were the edges close together? Was it a dry scab? Was it wet and oozing, etc.? Moving into the results. I think this slide is probably one of the most interesting slides, but takes the longest to orientate everybody. So I'll take a couple minutes here. On the bottom axis, or across the bottom of the slide, we have time: 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 120 minutes, 150 and 180 minutes post-castration. Within each time point, we have the 4 treatments: rubber ring saline, rubber ring Banamine or FM, surgical saline, surgical Banamine. On the left-hand axis, we have the percentage of lambs that were exhibiting these behaviors. And so when we go all the way over to the right, a 4 or black would indicate the most stressful behaviors. So we pooled that scoring system for behavior to talk about very stressful, moderately stressful, slightly stressful, less stressful, and theoretically 0 stress. So when looking at this color-coded system or black and white system, if there was 0 stress that we observed, that is the white portion of the bar, and every bar will equal 100%. And as that color gets darker, it's more stressful. So if we look at the first 30 minutes post-castration and docking, what we can see in these first two bars, which are rubber ring, they had more dark or more stressful observed behaviors than the surgical castrated and docked. But very little difference between Banamine and no Banamine. Same thing with surgical. More stressful events for rubber ring compared to surgical, but not much difference to the use of Banamine. When we go to 60 minutes post-castration and docking, we can start to see that the white is increasing, so there's less lambs exhibiting stressful behaviors. We still see that there's a difference between rubber ring and surgical, and once again, not a lot of difference to the use of Banamine. And that trend of decreasing behavioral scores obviously goes on through 180 minutes post-castration and docking. We're at the end, we see very little difference between the four treatments, but we maybe see that the rubber ring flunoxameglumine and the rubber ring saline, when you combine those two, might have less behavioral scores, especially when given Banamine. When we looked at cortisol, a stress hormone, at the beginning, or minus 30 prior to the start of the trial, they're all at the relatively the same level as they should have been. And then we look at 30 minutes post-castration and docking. The black line would be the surgical castrated with saline, and it had significantly higher cortisol concentrations than any of the rubber ring castrated. And then the blue line, which would be surgical with Banamine, was intermediate. As time goes by, this is what I think is interesting for cortisol, is at 140 minutes post-castration and docking, the surgical castration without Banamine had significantly higher cortisol concentrations, but there was no difference between the other three treatments, indicating that for cortisol, Banamine definitely decreased the cortisol concentration, specifically with surgical castration. When we looked at haptoglobin, we see similar type responses, but in the inverse fashion. When we look at the haptoglobin column here, the response variables, a higher number means a higher concentration of haptoglobin. And we saw that the rubber ring saline had a higher concentration of haptoglobin throughout the trial when averaged than the rubber ring flunoxameglumine, as well as higher than both the scrotal, both the surgical treatments, both saline and the flunoxameglumine. So in this case, the rubber ring was a more stressful event, but Banamine helped decrease that concentration. When we looked at wound and swelling scores, the scores were kind of what you expect for technique, that there was more swelling of the scrotum and tail when we used rubber rings than we used surgical. We would expect that to happen just in the holding of the fluids in. We also saw with Banamine that there was no difference between Banamine and saline for swelling or wound scores. And that is different than some of the results that have been seen by other trials for surgical castration and docking. But wound and swelling scores, not a lot of difference between Banamine and no Banamine, and then kind of the expected differences we'd see between the types of castration techniques. When we look at average daily gain, there was no difference. So even though we did see some behavioral responses, some cortisol responses, and some haptoglobin responses, at the end of the day at weaning, we saw no difference in average daily gain or final weight based on type of castration and docking or Banamine versus no Banamine. So what are our implications? Lamb docking and castration are both acceptable and ethically acceptable practices that benefits outweigh the welfare risks. We obviously know that if we don't, especially in places with flies, if we don't castrate and dock, we're going to end up with fly strike due to tails. We're going to end up increased riding of the ram lambs in the feedlot, as well as potential negative traits for meat quality. That's not what we were debating in this trial. What we're looking at is whether or not there's a difference between the two castration techniques and the use of Banamine. And our data suggests that rubber ring castration and docking cause an increase in behavioral stress compared to surgical castration and docking and swelling. But surgical techniques cause an increase in cortisol stress as well as changing the way the wounds look. So there were differences between the trials, difference within the trial between surgical castration and rubber ring castration, depending on the response variable. But for those response variables that were elevated, once again, more behavioral stress for rubber ring castration and more cortisol-related stress for surgical castration. For those lambs that had an increased level of stress, Banamine, or flunoxameglumine, did decrease those concentrations or those behavioral responses. So it did appear to be beneficial for castration and docking. Future research, there's obviously a plethora of research that can be done, as this is really the first large trial that's been done. We did not look at long-term health implications, that if cortisol was increased, did it have effect on lamb health later in life? We also didn't look at different docking and castration techniques or different analgesics and ways of applying them, either topical or orally, or just different use of different drugs. So there's plenty of research left to be done out there, but I think this provides a good baseline data set for people that are interested in going into this type of research and evaluating the use of analgesics and castration and docking. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time. As you can see on the bottom, I have my email address, christopher.schauer@ndsu.edu, and feel free to email me if you have any questions from this presentation. Thank you.
Okay, there we have it. Do you have any questions, Alyssa?
No additional questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Matt or Stephen? Well, if you're still typing, I'm going to go ahead and thank a few people beforehand, and then we'll get caught up just before we change. But we do want to thank our sponsors: Stay Tough, Superior, Pride Ag, Purina, TPRA, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, the Shepherd's Mill, and KSRE, the extension councils from Hodgman, Ford, Gray, Pawnee, and Edwards. We want to thank Lacey and Nick, Bill, Joe, Matt, Stephen, and Christopher for bringing us words of wisdom and a lot of information tonight.